That signal's not human, but it knows our language. The words left Commander Jarek Vol staring into the laser plasma display, one hand locked on the edge of the console, the other still hovering near the signal interpreter's manual override. The room had gone rigid, tension crawling across the shoulders of every officer, like static before a lightning strike. Lieutenant Damer's throat moved as he swallowed. "Sir, transmission confirmed. Repeating in Concord Standard, syntax level, fluent, cadence, mimicry level, high." Where did it come from? Jarek didn't look at him. His eyes were still fixed on the waveform projection twisting in front of him, like a whisper encoded in light. "Deep outer system," Damar said, flipping to a wider orbital view on the heads-up display. "Beyond Neptune, origin point triangulated between 3 relay shadows. It's using quantum hops. We can't lock it down." Jarek stepped away from the console, boots thudding on the grated flooring. Cold air hissed from a nearby conduit. The scent of coolant lingered like frozen chlorine. "And it's speaking our diplomatic trade tongue. Of 17 races, it picked that." "It's bait," said Sub-Officer Merrick. "Or a bluff." Jarek turned to face them. "You ever hear a bluff wrapped in galactic encryption protocols 3 tech generations ahead of Concord systems?" Silence. Not even the console tones broke it. Outside the reinforced viewport, the curve of Earth glowed, half lit by the sun's reach, and past it, Saturn's edge, distant and soft, shimmered like a predator's outline in mist. Somewhere out there, something was speaking to them. Something not human. Something watching. "Play it again," Jarek said. The voice that came through wasn't robotic. It wasn't synthetic. It was familiar. Each syllable came shaped by the phonetics of Concord Law dialect, the kind Earth ambassadors had spent years memorizing syllable by syllable. "This message is not deception. This message is not threat. The Vrank Collective approaches. You will be offered integration. Deny it. Prepare. They do not stop." Damar flinched as the signal ended. Merrick took a slow step back, his boots scraping faintly. "Commander? We can't ignore that. Even if it's bait. It knows about the Vrank." Jarek turned to the comms wall and hit the override. "Patch me through to Fleet Comm Priority Alpha. I want Commander Rylan Vol briefed and airborne within 5. I don't care what field exercise he's running. Pull him." "Sir," Damas hesitated. "That'll trigger orbital command flags. Concord'll see it." "Then let them." The lights flickered as power rerouted through the upper relay. Somewhere above, the outer panels of the station groaned with the shift in solar shielding. Earth's orbital spine wasn't just a watchtower, it was the first wall. Jarek walked to the edge of the viewport, the pulse in his neck matching the slow, deliberate clicks of cooling systems behind him. He didn't blink as Earth's sunline slid across the deck. "If Concord's monitoring, I want them to panic before we do." 20 minutes later, Rylan Vol's boots struck deck at the station's central docking port. He strode through the hatch, still peeling off his flight gloves, his face stone-set, jaw tight. "You found it," Rylan said without preamble. Jarek didn't bother nodding. He only raised a hand, pulling up the playback on the primary display. The message began again, calm as law, fluent as any Concord tribunal diplomat. Rylan stood still the entire time, not even a flicker in his expression. When it ended, he let out a slow breath, as though a heat wave had passed through his spine. "You're sure it's not our echo?" he asked. "Some remnant signal from early Mars missions, garbled and looped?" "No. This came through Concord quantum bands, encrypted beyond Earth's standard lattice range. And, this is important, Rylan, it knew our syntactic preferences. It used diplomatic phrasing, not military cadence. So someone wants to warn us, but doesn't want to be known." Jarek tapped the screen. "Or doesn't exist anymore. That tech in the signal? Not Vrank. And not Concord." Behind them, the lights dimmed as the station adjusted power draw. A moment later, the tactical board lit with a ping. A new alert. Damar's voice came through sharply. Commander! Collision-grade proximity alert near Saturn's upper orbit. 2 satellites offline. Systems scrambled. Possible active camouflage signatures logged. Jarek's eyes narrowed. Vrink scouts? Most likely. Their drones haven't used orbital push-ins since the Trion disruption. Ryland's fingers curled into fists. They're testing outer system response. And they just cut our eyes, Jarek muttered. Within minutes, the heads-up display pulled in real-time visuals from the lunar surveillance network. The frames were choppy, patchy from debris interference, but one image showed it all. A smear of black across the stars. It wasn't a ship. It was a shadow with a purpose. The comm system flared. Incoming diplomatic frequency, high band, Concord. Don't answer, Ryland said, his voice low. We have to, Jarek replied. They're going to accuse us anyway. The channel opened, audio only. The voice was clipped, unmistakably Tharnic. A Concord enforcer cast. The translator barely kept up. Earth Command, we have detected unauthorized transmissions in Concord trade tongue from your quadrant. This action violates Article 7 of Interstellar Code. Surrender the signal origin immediately, or face protocol sanctions. Ryland stepped forward. Concord Command, this is Ryland Vall. No part of this signal originated from Earth systems. It's alien in origin. You have our wave logs. Cross-check your transmission encryption. Our systems cannot decrypt the quantum signature. Earth's may be ahead of Concord classification. We must assume intent. The transmission ended without pause. Ryland turned to his brother. They think we're faking it. They're afraid, Jarek replied, because something just spoke their language, better than they do, and it didn't come from inside their borders. Outside, the Earth's curve had shifted. A soft blue line traced the planet's atmosphere. Ryland watched it quietly, his pulse steadying. They're going to come for the source, he said. We won't hand it over. Jarek's voice was calm, cold. He turned back to the board. Pull probe telemetry logs from the 209022100 window. Check for deep system activity flagged anomalous. Any unmanned vessels we lost near Neptune during that period, catalog them. And if we find one? Yark looked at him, no hesitation, no doubt. We're sending someone out there, quietly, before Concord decides they don't need us involved at all. From somewhere inside the station's hull, the low thrum of engines preparing launch shivered through the floor. The deck lights turned red. Ryland didn't blink. I picked the pilot. The stars outside didn't flicker. They waited. Sol's the only one I'd trust to bring it back intact, Ryland said, keeping his tone anchored and firm. Commander Jarek didn't answer immediately. He watched the orbital map as new interference zones appeared near Saturn's outer curve, spreading like bruises under a sensor grid. He crossed his arms, the fabric of his uniform stiff from dried condensation, and turned toward the launch roster pinned to the deck's operations table. You've seen what the Vrenk are doing, Ryland continued, and if that probe holds what I think it does, we'll need someone who doesn't ask twice when the stakes change mid-light. Jarek nodded once. Get him up here. Quiet channel, use the fallback line. They didn't need to explain further. Both men had lived through enough to know what kind of retrieval this would be. No shields, no signals, and no support if it turned ugly halfway to the belt. 3 hours later, Captain Corin Saul stepped out of the lift into ops without ceremony. His flight jacket was zipped to the collar, his hands gloved, face unreadable. He walked like a man who'd landed under fire more times than anyone had logged, but still held rank because he finished what others started. Didn't expect a call from either of you unless a black site burned down or a relay went sentient, he said, stopping beside Ryland, eyes flicking toward the wall screen. Neither, Jarek replied. Worse. Saul tilted his head. I'm listening. Ryland pulled up the projection. This probe was part of Earth's 2098 outer system sweep. Designation: T-19 Archival Drone. It vanished after deployment. Until now, he enlarged the final telemetry burst. Barebones data sketched over a rogue asteroid orbit, lodged in an irregular field that wasn't there 6 years ago. We found the probe transmitting that warning signal. It's wrapped in alien hardware, something even Concord's tech can't untangle. Whoever modified it knew exactly how to build across human signal routes using Concord transmission ethics. Saul studied the data, his jaw tightening slightly. You want me to pull it out? We want it without a scratch, Jarek said. What's inside it might be the only clear intelligence we have on the Vrenk Collective, and right now, the Concord thinks we're behind that message. Saul looked up. They're about to lean on Earth. Harder than we've ever seen, Ryland confirmed. Saul exhaled through his teeth, dragging his thumb across the stubble along his jaw. How long do I have? You leave in 2 hours. You'll take the Hecarim-class stealth shuttle, black coil reactors only. You'll swing past Saturn's shadow bands and loop through the core arc before slingshotting into the belt. Navigation will be locked down. You'll have no relay back unless you make it through the outbound field. Saul looked at them both. You didn't call me for the easy run. We called you, Jarek said, because you pulled 23 men off a shattered freighter with oxygen tanking and 1 booster between them. Because Ryland said if you take the flight, you'll make the call, even if it gets ugly. A flicker passed behind Saul's eyes. For a second, the quiet between the 3 men said more than anything logged on mission charts. He nodded. Get the shuttle prepped. The hangar bay groaned under pressure locks as Saul's boots struck the ramp. The cold bit instantly dry. Recycled air swirled with hydraulic grease and carbon dust from maintenance scaffolds. The shuttle stood in the middle of the deck, its plating already stained from thermal layering. The moment Saul stepped inside, he locked down the internal safety matrix. There'd be no help once he reached the asteroid. His fingers worked through the launch cycle while his voice relayed into Earth Command. Vol, this is Sol, departing in 8. Reactors green, all ballast systems synced. Guidance algorithms are preloaded and external magnetics have been polarized. Keep comms dark unless I break protocol. You'll know if it's me. Rilland's voice cracked in over the line, dry, controlled, focused. If you see anything that doesn't belong, scan twice. Don't touch. You know how far this can spiral. Understood. Bring it back. I don't leave my runs unfinished, Sol replied. The shuttle launched with a sharp, lateral push, slipping past Earth's gravity well. The interior panels rattled briefly before settling. His flight path arced inward toward the darker edge of Neptune's reach and then into the belt where tracking grew unstable. Minutes turned to hours. Radio static pulsed against his headset. A long, narrow streak passed across the portside view. A fragment of something charred and fast. Then, like a whisper dragged into focus, the rogue asteroid came into view. It spun slowly, uneven. Ice striations caught the solar reflection, but the object embedded in it was unmistakable. The probe looked like someone had cracked it open and soldered alien veins into its spine. It glowed faintly, not light, but movement inside. Too patterned for natural behavior. Saul narrowed his eyes, maneuvering closer. Lockfield engaged, initiating magnetic tether. As the shuttle's claw anchored into the rock, a thin tremor ran through the cockpit. He sealed the cabin, lowered the retrieval dock, and stepped into the black. The tether held. Sol moved slow, boots magnetized against the jagged rock. The air inside his suit was dry, recycled, tinged with the plastic scent of aged filters. Every step clanged softly through the line. He reached the probe. It wasn't transmitting anymore. The alien additions pulsed under the surface. Thin conduits, shaped like branching root systems, fused into the probe's original telemetry panel. Someone had injected technology into it, not wrapped it around. He hooked the cutter into the primary access panel and began tracing it open. Inside, the probe's core was untouched, but alongside it, a narrow sliver of Concorde circuitry blinked once. "Someone piggybacked this," he muttered. "This wasn't Earthwork, it's Concorde hardware." But warped. His suit scanner caught the transmission route. He tagged it, then activated the probe's memory core. Data spilled to his helmet display. Images, tactical assessments, energy signatures matching known Vrank drone vessels, movement models, planetary paths, an analysis of Earth's planetary orbit coded in Vrank logic. Earth had been mapped, tracked. "Rillin," he whispered into the comms, breaking silence protocol. "They've been watching us." The last image stunned him. A Concorde encryption key, classified level, issued only to internal dissident factions, meaning someone within the Concorde had seen the Vrank's expansion and had tried to warn Earth without exposing themselves. Sol closed the panel, locked the probe into the harness, and began the return to the shuttle. His breath fogged the inside of his visor, and for the first time in a decade, Captain Sol felt like the war had already started. Long before Earth ever got the invitation, the probe hit the deck like a sealed coffin, cold, silent, covered in frost pulled from the asteroid's surface. Technicians in sealed suits surrounded it instantly, their instruments hissing as clamps locked and thermal filters activated. Commander Ryland Vall watched from behind reinforced glass, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Captain Sol hadn't said a word since docking. He stood beside the probe with his helmet tucked under one arm, the sweat along his temples already dry. "They built into it," Sol said quietly. "Didn't wrap it, didn't hijack it. Whoever did this. They buried the warning in our own circuitry." Ryland nodded once. "You scanned everything before locking it?" "Every layer, no leaks, no triggers. But the encryption key inside? That wasn't Vrank, it was Concorde." Ryland turned toward the inner corridor and walked without waiting. Sol followed. By the time they entered Command Briefing Bay, half the council was already patched in through multi-feed relay. The room was tense. Compressed air systems clicked behind the panels, and the steel scent of sterilizers clung to every surface. The high-ranking faces from the Galactic Concorde flickered into view one by one. The delay between Earth and the Orion Arm relay meant every statement came with half a breath of silence before a reply. Still, nothing about their expressions indicated misunderstanding. Counselor Bravik, Concorde's compliance director, spoke first. His tone was clipped and accusatory. "Earth Command has violated Article 7 by deploying unauthorized signal artifacts in Concorde-protected space. Your recovered probe, if genuine, suggests interference with galactic diplomatic protocols. We require immediate possession of the object." Ryland didn't blink. "You've received our sensor logs. This probe predates current signal deployment restrictions. Earth didn't build that signal. It was sent to us, and we were attacked while retrieving it. We've reviewed the audio files. Concorde standard, fluently spoken. Signal origin remains unverified. Quantum encryption beyond council-approved waveform capacity. It resembles sabotage." Captain Sol stepped forward. "I nearly died getting that thing back. If Earth faked it, why would we risk a stealth pilot for a staged broadcast? You retrieved alien-modified tech during a time of escalating conflict. Your fleet's alignment with Concorde security remains unratified. The Coalition interprets this act as a possible prelude to armed provocation." Ryland didn't raise his voice. "Then interpret this. While you argue about protocol, Vrank units are operating in Saturn's upper orbit. We lost 2 satellites. 3 hours ago, they struck the freighter Silverline on its cargo run past Titan. 50 crew gone. No warning, no declaration." Bravik froze. One of the other counselors leaned forward, muting his own panel feed to speak directly. "Are you confirming Vrank engagement against Earth civilian logistics?" Ryland input the transmission packet manually. Images bled across the board. Hull fragments, spinning near Saturn's outer field, heat blooms from the impact zones, and final transmission logs from the freighter's navigation AI. Static, blurred the last seconds of their signal, but the data was indisputable. The room shifted. Every observer watching from Earth's side could feel the undercurrent change. Political theater had cracked under the pressure of footage and death tolls. Ravik still tried to maintain ground, greater than. Even so, retaliatory escalation cannot proceed without council approval. "I'm not asking for approval," Ryland said flatly. He turned away from the feed, facing his own operations team. Sol met his gaze across the room. "We're out of time," Ryland said. "Initiate Echo Protocol. Full systems go. I want every relay node within Jupiter's curve pinged and tagged. We need access to their field network within the hour." One of his analysts looked up, startled. "Sir, that system's still in dormant state." "Then wake it." The room moved fast after that. Terminal consoles flared with activity. Code streams spilled across sideboards as Earth's internal AI core, Project Echo, came online for the first time since the end of the Pale Spire skirmish 5 years ago. Echo wasn't a weapons platform. It didn't fire missiles or control drones. It wasn't designed to destroy. It was built to collapse networks from the inside. Ryland leaned close to the neural input console, watching the initialization spin through its encrypted layers. Route Echo through the black subnet. Full crawl pattern, unrestricted branches. The technician hesitated. "That will activate adaptive scripting. You'll lose manual override after full integration." "I'm aware." Sol folded his arms. "You're planning to feed their relay structure into something they've never encountered." "They work through linked control swarms," Ryland said. "Command relays, decision logic trees, layered hive protocols. If we drop noise into the neural architecture, real noise, synthetic chaos that mimics their own modulation, they'll fragment. And if they adapt, then we'll burn their signal chain node by node." One of the outer wall displays lit up with Concore feed reactivation. Bravik was back. "Earth Command. Under Concord Treaty, you are prohibited from initiating system-wide AI programs targeting external species without council sanction." Ryland didn't even turn to face the screen. "You sanctioned delay. You sanctioned doubt. Now Earth's sanctioning itself." He keyed the final command. Project Echo pulsed green. Within the hour, the Vrink field would start to shudder. Not from kinetic force, not from weapons fire, but from the kind of interference they'd never had to survive before. Something built to think like them, but evolved by humans who refused to think like prey. Captain Corin Saul watched the data feeds race across the auxiliary monitors as the shuttle's outer shell ticked with the subtle strain of atmospheric friction. The asteroid had changed position since his last retrieval run, drifted 6 degrees off its expected trajectory, and now skimmed along a denser radiation corridor, the kind that fouled instruments and triggered secondary failsafes. He adjusted course with short staggered bursts from the side stabilizers, keeping the hull temperature below the red line. Inside the cockpit, the stale air smelled of polymer stress and heat-treated cables. His knuckles were pale on the navigation grips, fingers twitching against the calibrated tactile surfaces as he ran a thermal sweep. "Drone signatures," his co-pilot said over the internal comm. 6, no cloaking. They're not hiding anymore." Sol tapped in a vector overlay. "Vrink don't scout. They hunt. That means they know what this rock is. We're 10 minutes from tethering range. Do we abort?" He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he triggered the internal clamp lock that would seal the probe casing once it was on board. Then he turned toward the rear hold where the decoy beacons sat dormant, still unarmed. "No abort. We break for the retrieval, fire the beacons on exit vector, and ride the drift curve until we can align with return coordinates. Full stealth mode. If we jump out with them on our tail, we're dead before the AI finishes unwrapping the data." The other officer didn't respond. Orders that meant risking the entire shuttle usually didn't require clarification. Outside, the asteroid loomed into view. It wasn't rotating naturally anymore. Its motion was being nudged, irregularly, by something external. Sol caught the flicker of rank drones darting in the distance, banking in lazy arcs as if drawing patterns around the object. He braced himself as they moved closer. A loud chirp from the forward stabilizers rang out. Tracking lock on the probe. Anchoring trajectory now. The tether deployed from the shuttle's forward clamp with a sharp metallic snap. Sol moved to the airlock, sealed the outer hatch behind him, and stepped into the suit chamber. The rush of cooling air slid across his face, and the helmet display flickered as it connected to his command overlay. Each breath echoed louder in the confined space as he moved through the manual tether route, boots clanking across the reinforced arm. The surface of the asteroid was uneven, jagged, scarred from ancient impacts and recent interference. A thin layer of dust shifted beneath each step. He reached the probe, knees bending to maintain balance as he adjusted the gravity compensator on his backplate. The object was half embedded in the rock, grafted into its surface like a parasite with roots. Glowing junctions flickered where alien circuitry laced around the Earth-built casing. The central panel was partially exposed. Sol reached out, fingers guiding the magnetic latches around the probe's retrieval points. Locking sequence engaged, he murmured. Then the radar alert went off. Sol. 4 drones inbound. Front-facing weapon ports active. He didn't reply. He pushed the final clamp into place, jerked the probe free, and initiated the pullback command. As the tether dragged both him and the device back toward the shuttle, the first plasma bolt struck the asteroid near his boots, sending shards of superheated rock flying. One chunk skipped across his suit visor, cracking the outer layer but not piercing it. Inside the shuttle, the co-pilot had already launched the beacons. They split apart in 6 trajectories, emitting low-frequency thermal bursts and mimicking engine pulses. The drones faltered, split formation, and tracked the decoys instead. Sol rolled into the shuttle's cargo ramp as the airlock shut behind him. The blast doors locked with a vibrating clang. The probe was secured against the rear wall. His arms trembled as he collapsed against the bulkhead, adrenaline still burning through his veins. "Punch us through the drift window," he said through gritted teeth, "and kill all active transmissions." The shuttle accelerated. Behind them, 2 of the decoys were already wiped from radar, likely destroyed, but the others kept scattering noise as intended. 4 hours later, inside Earth's deep space shipyards beneath the Europa-class station, Ryland Vall stood in front of the retrieved probe. Its casing was stripped now, panels laid out across the lab floor like puzzle pieces soaked in firelight. Every embedded cable, every chip, every arc of foreign tech had been catalogued. And what it revealed changed everything. The relay structure. Non-organic, modular, frequency reactive. It wasn't just broadcasting warnings. It had mapped the Vrink's neural coordination paths. Lines of communication that pulsed between hive units in timed, modulated intervals, all shielded by layers of quantum encryption. Ryland stepped back, arms crossed. "This is it," he said. "This is their spine." One of the analysts looked up. "You're sure the data's real?" Ryland didn't answer immediately. He walked to the side terminal, keyed in the encoded pulse scan, and watched as the simulation rendered a Vrink drone network overlaid across Saturn's rings. There, in the outer arc, a node flared, a command core hidden within the natural magnetic flux of the rings themselves. "They're using Saturn's field as camouflage," Ryland said. "That relay node is the root. If we seed Echo into that node, the signal will ripple through the entire hive chain." "You'd be activating Echo's autonomous branch," one technician said quietly. "We built Echo to evolve inside data, not just mimic code. If we hardwire its payload with variable replication logic, it'll adapt faster than the Vrink can seal it out." Another engineer shook his head. "That also means if it misfires, we lose override." Ryland turned toward the window, watching the outer station rotate beneath the moonlight. He remembered what the Concorde had said, what Earth had been accused of, and what they were now facing. "I'm not interested in override," he said. "I want them disconnected before they know what disconnection means." He turned back toward the control bank. Tag the relay node inside Saturn's rings. Begin power-up sequence for Echo. Once the virus payload is finalized, we'll move it through the deep-line quantum gate, and we strike. The techs scattered to their stations, boots echoing against the grated floor. Ryland stood alone for a moment longer. He didn't breathe easy, not yet. The countdown had begun. But Earth's survival wasn't in whether the virus could break the Vrank. It was in whether Echo could outthink them fast enough to burn the bridge behind it. The Antarctic server farm crouched beneath 100 feet of reinforced ice and tungsten composite shielding, buried so deep the surface storms above never touched its temperature-regulated shell. Inside, the air tasted like cold copper and overworked insulation. Every wall pulsed with cable-veined conduit, and the heat exchangers beneath the floor tiles vibrated with the slow-breath rhythm of a machine designed never to sleep. Commander Ryland Vall entered without escort. His boots left wet trails over the steel-gray tile as the corridor lights activated one by one. Ahead of him stood the AI core chamber vault, vaulted, locked, and flanked by twin reactive panels that confirmed his BIOS signature before letting him through. He passed under the scanner arc without pause. Inside the chamber, the Echo housing system awaited. It didn't look like a weapon. It resembled a fractured sculpture, its housing constructed from an alloy so old it no longer appeared in any industrial registry. Within the twisted structure, circuits moved, literally. They slid over one another in adaptive rotation, generating new code with each cycle. 2 operators were already at their stations. The lead technician nodded once. Echoes primed, all firewalls are in passive hold. Once the bridge link with Saturn completes, we can begin phase transfer. Route it through the sublayer blind spectrum, Ryland ordered. Don't let it announce itself until it's halfway into their lattice. He moved to the manual relay board and keyed in his authentication. There was a slight heat building at his wrist where his ID band pressed into his skin, confirmation pulse. He stared at the core. Open Echo's nested branch functions. Let it evolve with every micro shift. The technician hesitated. Once we open that layer, we won't know how far it builds beyond the task. Ryland's eyes didn't leave the board. That's the point. A signal chimed. Quiet, direct. The Saturn ring node had just been tagged. Data from the asteroid probe matched the quantum interference radiating from a narrow band between orbital ring striations. It was a Vrank relay core, built to hide under electromagnetic distortion. They hadn't cloaked it, they had buried it inside nature's noise. Launch Echo, Ryland said. The command entered without flair, no dramatics. The circuits inside the core moved faster, shifting their pattern, generating layers of neural dissonance. Then the bridge connected. Thousands of kilometers away, the virus hit the Vrank network like an unexpected guest, speaking their own tongue but laughing at the wrong jokes. At first, nothing changed. On tactical readouts, Vrank drone paths remained symmetrical, rotating as they always had, tight coils of synchronized efficiency. But 3 minutes later, a drone overshot a patrol arc and clipped its wing partner. Another failed to complete its docking maneuver and slammed into the rear hull of a command cruiser. Then 5 drones stopped mid-turn, hanging in motion, their signals jammed into recursive logic loops they couldn't exit. The chaos didn't spike, it bloomed. At Earth's tactical headquarters, just west of the equatorial defense line, Commander Vall stood before the forward projection grid as ships around Saturn began colliding. The sensor analysts watching the feed stared in silence. Feed that directly to Concord Command, Ryland said. No edits, full telemetry. Include the raw stream from Echo's entry point. Sir, they haven't acknowledged our last 3 diplomatic packets, said the relay officer. Doesn't matter. This one doesn't need their approval, it needs their attention. At the same time, orbital footage played across hidden channels. A Vrank command ship turned into its own formation, misreading friendly drones as unverified targets. Plasma fire from its lower cannon burst into its escorts. One shattered, spiraled downward, struck the outer hull of a mining freighter fleeing the zone. The image was raw. No graphics, no filters. By the time Concord's main relay did respond, their tone had changed. Commander Vol, the Concord acknowledges receipt of your submission. The data is conclusive. Ryland faced the comm screen as new feeds loaded. Senior Concord delegates watching their own simulations implode. None of them spoke first. Ryland did. That signal from the asteroid wasn't ours. It was a warning you ignored. Echo is now inside their relay spine. If you wish to assist in planetary defense, do it now. Otherwise, clear the lane and stay out of the way. The Concord's reply wasn't formal. We're mobilizing 5 fleets. Defensive authorization has been granted. Ryland cut the channel. He turned toward the command board. Prepare orbital batteries for post-disruption counterstrike. The drones will collapse in batches, but the larger Vrink command vessels will stabilize eventually. Won't we trigger a reintegration attempt? One analyst asked. They could push a recursive reset on the swarm. That's why Echo is generating new logic every 60 seconds, Ryland said. If they chase it, they drown. Sir, the fleet comms officer interjected. Captain Sol just submitted re-entry approval. His team's shuttle hit 2 Vrink trackers on return, but made it to shielded orbit. Minimal damage. Authorize his landing, and get me Sol directly. The comm line patched in mid-orbit. Sol's voice came through grainy but solid. You dropped that thing into the fire, Vol. It's burning, Ryland replied. What's next? We cut the route while they're still choking on the branches. Give me a ship, then, Sol said. If we're striking while they're down, I want to be in the air, not sitting behind a console. Ryland closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened the internal fleet assignment board. The Vindicant-class interceptor Veldar's Run had just cleared for high-impact recon. He assigned Sol with 1 motion. You fly in 12. Target will be selected once we confirm Echo's reach inside their core nodes. Understood, Sol replied. I'll be ready. As the line went dead, Ryland returned to the wall projection. Vrink formations were splitting. Not retreating. Failing. They had no concept for internal disruption. They had been engineered to move in harmony. Now, with that harmony broken, they thrashed. And Earth, finally, had a moment to breathe. But not long. The disruption wouldn't last forever. And he would use every second of it to prepare for what came next. Orbital Command erupted with alerts before dawn reached Earth's southern hemisphere. Emergency channels flickered alive one by one. Station integrity reports, heat index anomalies, collision trajectory markers from debris scattering at impossible angles. The Vrink had not retreated. They had reorganized. In under 13 minutes, 3 Earth stations were hit. Argon Point disintegrated first, its fuel lines detonating against the orbital rail, spraying molten alloy across the tether grid. Relay 6, stationed near the lunar docking spine, fractured under impact, its scaffolding folded inward like torn paper. Baylock Ring was pulled out of sync and struck by a hijacked logistics drone, ripping 2 sectors from its rotation band. Ryland stood motionless at Earth Tactical's command bridge, gripping the upper rail of the projection console. His voice was dry, steady, and absolute. They've recalibrated swarm logic. Echo's collapse wave only hit the outer control relays. Core units are rewriting commands locally. The comms officer, a short-built man with shaking hands, looked over his console. Lunar habitat orbits compromised. Debris fields spreading. Civilian transports have nowhere to dock. Ryland nodded once. Divert them to the Polar Drift Station. Pull all combat-capable craft into shield formation. We screen Luna at all costs. Another officer called out. Vrink pods pushing past Earth's 4th orbital band, 73 confirmed units. Half are still erratic, the rest, not anymore. Across the command deck, tactical projections began shifting. What was once chaos had grown teeth again. Drones no longer collided. They repositioned. Earth's advantage from Echo was crumbling fast. Rillan turned to the communications grid. Where's Sol? En route from strike formation. Veldar's run took frontal damage after his last pass. Patch him through, now. The screen lit with static before stabilizing on Captain Sol's cockpit. Blood streaked across his temple, dried and clotted near his right brow. The cabin lights behind him flickered under emergency load. Vol, I've got one shot left at getting through their screen. After that, I'm out of shields. You still armed? I've got 2 anti-core javelins left. My coil cannon's offline. Rylan didn't blink. Then, you're the tip. Sol glanced to his left, where the co-pilot was unconscious, slumped against his harness. What am I aiming at? Rylan switched feeds and uploaded the drone cluster formation around the lead Varank command vessel. They've built a rotating wall of auto-firing drones, hit the core when they fold inward. Echo's bleed-through hasn't reached their backbone yet. We buy time now or we lose the moons. Sol didn't hesitate. Tell them to clear me a corridor. I'm going in dry. The signal ended. Outside lunar orbit, the debris field looked like a cloud of jagged teeth. Station panels, hull scraps, oxygen tanks, and dead satellites spinning in chaotic arcs. Sol's ship pushed into it without blinking. Nav warnings. With his shields rerouted to front-own absorption, every rear impact rang through the cabin like a hammer blow. He counted his trajectory manually. 7 seconds until rotation fold. The Varank drones circled once more, then compacted inward, their focus narrowed to a different target. Sol triggered the javelin lock. The cockpit shook violently, a coolant line burst behind him. His rear camera feed went black. He slammed the override. The javelin fired. It pierced the outer drones, then slammed into the exposed command unit beneath the 3rd layer. It didn't detonate instantly. It cooked. Superheated plasma drilled through the inner casement before rupturing. The core cracked, and the logic relay behind it flickered, then died. In that moment, the defensive spiral unraveled. Sol's ship tumbled as something exploded off his starboard wing. He spun sideways, lost cabin gravity, slammed against the ceiling, and saw the escape harness lights blink red. No time to stabilize. He blacked out. On Earth, the feed from Sol's assault went quiet. Rillan stood perfectly still. Around him, the command room erupted. Shouted updates, sudden drops in drone fire, alerts blinking green instead of red. The Varank swarm stalled. One by one, their drones stopped firing. Others turned on each other, confused by incomplete orders. The wall they'd built cracked, then collapsed inward. Deploy remaining assault squadrons, Rylan ordered. Strike from above. Sweep their outer band. Clean fast before they resync. As the Earth fleet surged forward, Rylan stepped away from the console and entered the adjacent operations bay. There, a small, reinforced compartment housed the Sentinel-class command frigate Vorn's Gate, his personal vessel. It had been on standby since the first Concord meeting. It carried one thing no other ship did, the final tier of Project Echo, self-replicating, untraceable, and untested. He walked through the pressurized dock corridor. The ship's interface scanned him instantly and activated the inner ramp. As he stepped aboard, the AI on board responded with initialization codes. Load the payload. Plot course directly into their central hive cluster. The voice that responded was synthetic, but carried Earthborn programming. Collision probability. Certain. Escape route. Non-existent. I'm not asking for a route, Rylan said. I'm asking for a window. He launched. The Vorn's Gate left Earth orbit under full override, every available thruster rerouted for speed. As it approached the edge of the disrupted swarm, Varank scouts attempted to intercept, but couldn't match trajectory. He was flying directly into the core. Inside the cockpit, Rylan sealed the final override protocol. Echo's core pulsed in its case. A small injection needle connected from the ship's central processor to Echo's final tier. It would trigger upon direct impact. He keyed in the only manual command still remaining. Execute. He reached for the eject handle. The screen blinked, and Rylan Vol was gone. The command frigate Voron's Gate barreled forward, hull panels vibrating under atmospheric strain as the impact counter ticked down in the corner of the cockpit. The Vrink hive ship, a grotesque amalgam of fused material and pulsing signal conduits, dominated the horizon. It wasn't built for travel. It was a thinking monolith, floating in silence, directing chaos from the shadows. Rylan Vol sat strapped into the pilot seat, hands locked on the manual override stick, the amplified echovirus humming inside the reactor core behind him. Inside the cabin, gravity flexed as structural stabilizers strained to keep the ship on trajectory. Rylan's eyes stayed on the targeting grid. The hive ship's perimeter drones had begun to scatter, half malfunctioning from earlier interference, half too slow to interpret the suicide vector he'd chosen. A red light flicked on above the escape bay entrance. It blinked once, then turned solid. Manual, ejection enabled. But each step toward the ejection pod door rattled through his chest. He could feel the ship's frame grow hotter. One of the forward plates must have torn off during the dive. Alarms didn't sound. They weren't needed. The heat under his boots was rising, and the pod hatch hissed as pressure differentials corrected themselves against the violent approach. He reached the panel, keyed in the final activation, and locked the trajectory of Voron's Gate into a straight collision path. The pod wouldn't steer. It would shoot him into the debris trail on a timed arc, low enough to be missed. Inside the pod, the restraint system clicked shut over his shoulders. A small display showed distance to impact, 37 kilometers, 28, 22. Then a confirmation tone sounded, and the pod launched. The G-force snapped his breath from his chest. The cabin shook, lights flickered, and for a moment, Rylan thought the frame might crack open from the force. But it held. He twisted in his seat and caught one final view through the rear port. Voron's Gate hit the Vrink hive vessel with unflinching speed. The impact wasn't cinematic. There was no bloom of fire. Instead, the hive ship ruptured from within. The moment of contact triggered Echo's detonation sequence, an artificial cascade of recursive commands injected straight into the Vrink's central logic core. The hive ship's panels flared with internal stress, their signals rebounding violently across relay systems that had never been designed to resist feedback. One by one, Vrink drones across the field dropped. Not exploded, shut off. The swarm stopped moving, then twitched, then fell apart. Inside Earth's command center, technicians stood frozen. Data feeds scrambled as drone activity vanished. Hundreds of units vanished from the tracking grid. Surveillance cameras showed the swarm folding mid-formation, their units spiraling lifeless toward planetary gravity or simply drifting out of sync. For the first time since the invasion began, there was no red on the board. A relay officer turned toward the center of the room. Echo reached the core. "Rylan?" someone asked. The silence that followed confirmed the answer. In orbit, Captain Corensol had just regained consciousness inside a rescue frigate. Dried blood crusted his nose, and his right shoulder refused to move. A medic checked his vitals, but he waved him off. "Status?" Sol rasped. The medic handed him a tablet. "Impact confirmed, frigate collision registered. Vrink central structure, dissolved." Sol read the last line twice. He stood without help. Later that day, from a sealed chamber aboard Concorde's Orion relay station, a decision was transmitted directly to Earth's new planetary council. No grand speeches, no diplomatic grandstanding. Due to Earth's successful disruption of the Vrink Collective's command structure through unconventional but effective cybernetic warfare, Concorde sanctions are hereby rescinded. A formal invitation to join the Strategic Systems Council will be dispatched. Your command actions during this campaign have redefined acceptable tactical doctrine. Earth is no longer a fringe world, it is a partner. In a medical recovery wing above low orbit where Earth's fleet refueled and regrouped, the pod that carried Rylan Vol had been recovered from lunar drift. It had been cracked open by retrieval crews, and inside he had been found alive, unconscious, ribs fractured, and left arm broken in 3 places. Captain Soul stood beside the recovery tank as the respirator hissed over Ryland's face. The glass dome was covered in condensation from the internal systems, keeping his body temperature stable. Soul stared through the misted shield. "You should have told me." Ryland stirred but didn't speak. He hadn't fully regained consciousness. Sol's voice dropped to a whisper. "We would have followed you in." Behind him, a group of Earth officers stood in silent formation, waiting for orders. The war had ended without negotiation, without surrender. The Vrink would not be returning. Their core had been severed, and without it, they had no network, no swarm, no future. The weight of that final decision rested on one man's chest, wired to a heart monitor in a quiet hospital chamber above a planet that now stood undefeated. The silence wasn't peace. It was the breath before history recalibrated. The Vrank fleet was gone. Not scattered, not driven back. Their command systems dissolved. Their ships floated empty. Their signals vanished from every sensor net. Earth's tactical archives marked the final timestamp of engagement as the moment Vorn's Gate detonated within the hive vessel's structure. 10 seconds after Commander Rylan Vol ejected from his frigate and left the future in the hands of Echo. That timestamp became a reference point for planetary history. 0 mark. 4 weeks after 0 mark, the orbital docks were back in operation. The debris field had been cleared by unmanned harvesters. The Terran Security Council, created during the emergency phase of the war, remained active by unanimous vote of every major nation-state. No one wanted to return to fragmented military borders. No one could afford to. The TSC consolidated Earth's defense networks under one unified command, with standing orders to share technological data, pool research across regions, and run joint drills under full transparency. The lunar colonies, long treated as distant outposts, were folded into Earth's primary security grid and granted direct representation. No system on Earth would ever be caught unprepared again. The Concorde's offer arrived on the 21st day. A secure channel, hand-delivered by delegation, confirmed Earth's acceptance into the Strategic Systems Council. The message didn't mention the war directly, nor Echo by name. It only acknowledged Earth's demonstrated capacity for network warfare and independent threat resolution. That was all it took. Online, and Earth's seat at the galactic table was no longer debated. It was a fact. Inside the orbital hospital wing overlooking the Pacific Line, Rylan Vol opened his eyes for the first time since recovery. The glass panel beside him showed layered altitude markers and defense grid patterns. The room was sealed, monitored by 2 internal drones, and guarded by a pair of TSC officers in formal gray. He turned his head, slowly, and found Sol standing just beyond the bed's diagnostic arch. "You're walking," Sol said, arms folded. "I'd heard you were conscious. Didn't believe it." Ryland's voice was dry. Didn't think I'd wake up and find you alive either." Sol gave a short laugh, not out of humor, more out of memory. "I was told I bled through the flight deck and passed out mid-broadcast. I'm sure it looked heroic. You missed your mark by 6 seconds. Wouldn't be the first time." Ryland shifted slightly, wincing at the ache in his side. "How bad?" Sol moved to the window. "We lost 17 orbitals, 4 lunar relays, 623 personnel, no civilian losses during the final wave." "And the Vrank?" Sol didn't answer right away. He stared at the Earth below, cloud systems sweeping across oceans like pressure fronts lining up for a storm that wouldn't come. They didn't just lose. They fractured. Echo didn't erase them, it severed their ability to coordinate. No command logic, no fleet sync, no hierarchy. They're shards now, harmless. Ryland's eyes narrowed. "Harmless for how long?" "That's above my rank," Sol said. Council thinks the same thing. They've started drafting something called the Shatterpoint Doctrine, modeled off your campaign. Psychological asymmetry? Network subversion? We'll never match them in brute force, so we won't. Smart. And you? Saul asked. You're still listed as inactive advisory. They didn't reinstate you. I didn't ask them to. Saul hesitated, then turned toward the bed. You walked into a suicide run carrying Earth's last firewall. There are entire divisions wearing echo sigils now. You've become a lesson plan. Rylan shook his head. That virus worked because we were out of options. It's not a doctrine, it's a reminder. We win by not playing on their terms. He exhaled slowly. I'm not going back into a war seat. Sol leaned against the wall, expression unreadable. Then help me build what's next. TSC needs leadership, people who've been in the fire and know how to stay cold. I'll advise. I'm done giving commands. Sol nodded. Fair. Before leaving, he stopped at the doorway. One more thing. What? They figured out who built the upgraded probe? Ryland's gaze sharpened. Go on. Dissidents from the Concord's archive ring broke protocol, used their own encryption, fused it into one of our ancient probes and launched it to drift. Hoped we'd find it in time. They called it a preemptive trust exercise. Ryland closed his eyes for a long moment. How many of them are alive? Doesn't matter, Sol said. They changed the outcome. That's the only part history will remember. Later that month, every major city on Earth broadcast the decrypted files from the Vrink hive. Not just to governments. To everyone. Civilians saw the planetary maps, the path trajectories, the integration models, the neural load projections. For the first time, Earth didn't hide behind silence or spin. They showed the truth. In New Geneva, the Concord's delegation stood beside TSC leadership as the Planetary Alliance Charter was signed. One unified military, one intelligence network, one planetary defense pact. And for the first time, Earth's flag was uploaded into the Galactic Identity Ledger. Its encryption nested in the same framework the Concord once claimed humans couldn't crack. On that same day, inside the newly constructed Terran strategy complex, the doctrine Rylan once scrawled across a wall in a cold lab was turned into formal law. The Shatterpoint Doctrine. When direct engagement guarantees defeat, transform the rules. Divide perception. Infiltrate expectation. Victory favors the species that learns from its own disadvantage. Rylan Vall never returned to active service. He stayed in advisory roles, kept his name off medals, and refused public interviews. But inside every cadet classroom, his name was printed on the front page of the Echo Protocol Manual. Captain Saul went on to lead Earth's first Concord integrated fleet. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, a council vote ended with these words. The signal was never human, but the response was.